right, welcome back to All Hitches, Nova's #1 football podcast.
Number one in the program and number one in your hearts, right?
Yeah, we are America's favorite Nova football podcast. We are the barbershop, though, and we got some haircuts to do today in the barbershop. We sure do.
Yeah, okay. we got some interesting to talk about. How you doing, Coach Dash?
I'm doing pretty good, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. You watching anything good at all this summer?
No, I like watching movies that I've seen a lot of times already. You know,
you've seen a lot of movies.
I have, and my wife doesn't like watching movies over and over again like I do. So I just watched. I watched Weekend at Bernie's the other day. I'm a big Weekend at Bernie's guy.
Weekend at Bernie's.
Love Weekend at Bernie's. Great summer movie.
It is a good summer movie.
It really is.
That gets you that summer vibe, doesn't it?
It top of the dune. It sure does, man. Top of the dune. Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I will say this: football related shows, the wide receiver show on Netflix. I haven't seen it yet.
So I tried to watch it, and obviously I'm a huge 49er fan. I've been a 49er fan my whole life. I just couldn't get into it. I don't know. I mean, I think because you and I, being Gen Xers, we got to see early on in a reality show where people were kind of acting real, I guess. Where now everyone kind of knows how to act, and I feel like they're all kind of the same show. Don't get me wrong. I do watch the reality show on occasion, but so far I just couldn't. I don't know. It didn't catch my interest. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I've just seen clips. I haven't watched the show, but Devontae Adams is featured in it.
Devontae Adams is on it. Yeah,
that's probably the highlight right now because he's pretty candid from what I understand on the show, and he's not happy. He wasn't happy last year in Vegas, so we'll see what happens.
And good old Jimmy G.
It's your boy.
Good old Jimmy G. You know, I mean, he's known to miss the wide open guy. I mean, he missed a wide open guy, and we'd have Super Bowl number 6, but.
That's your boy. Well, today we start second conference. It's going to be the national conference.
All right.
Yeah, the national conference today. Which is a totally new look this year. Yeah,
absolutely. The interesting. We looked at the records, and the national conference has only made it out of the first round. Only two teams have made out of the first round in like the last 6 years. I think AC did. They were in the national at the time, but now they're currently in the Patriot. Really interesting if you take a look at it just from a perspective of school enrollment. They have the 2 lowest schools of enrollment between Mount Vernon and Lewis. There are almost as many kids who go to Woodson that go to those 2 schools in particular, and It's kind of across the board. They have some of the lowest attendance in the FCPS. What makes that really interesting is, so my first offensive coordinator job when I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, we were really a small school, and when you do the numbers, you start looking at, okay, how many male to females do we have, right? Population. And it turns out, and I'm willing to bet you might get the same thing at the similar kind of school. I was at West Mesa High School in Albuquerque. You look at population and the amount of boys in your school, and normally you have more girls than boys. When you have a school that might be struggling a little bit, they're great schools. I grew up on the west side of Long Beach, grew up in some rough areas, but they're great schools. But you look at population-wise, and unfortunately, boys just drop out more than girls do. And you look at that, and then you have to factor in eligibility. So you already have less boys already. So you have 2 schools like with Lewis and Mount Vernon. They have less kids to begin with. They probably have less boys. It means they have less boys. And then you have to look at the numbers as far as how many of them are actually eligible to play football. A lot of schools like that. And again, my first offensive coordinator job, you walk through there, and there were kids who would absolutely help you play football, but unfortunately, when they're not passing their classes, they might as well just kind of be persona non grata.
Right. Yeah. Well, you got me thinking. And what trivia question here? What national team was the last team to win a playoff game?
What national team was the last? I mean, it had to be Henderson at Hayfield, right? Is my guess.
No, it was Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon
in 2019.
Oh wow. Okay.
Mount Vernon in 19.
Okay. They were pretty good. I mean, that was
they were really good. They had a phenomenal quarterback. I think that was Monty Fritz was the head coach.
Yeah.
Some phenomenal athletes in that team, great quarterback. That team, we played them that year, so I recall that team pretty well. Now, ironically though, they beat a national team in that first round. So right. So then you could add another playoff question to that would be, to beat a non-national team. And that you probably would be right. That probably would be a Henderson Hayfield team.
Yeah. Right. They were pretty good. I mean, obviously the Hayfield teams with Eric Henderson were pretty talented. We're a talented
right.
bunch. Well, as a matter of fact, they had to be because they played Freedom, correct? They played Freedom. Before they played you and played them in a pretty close, toughly contested. It's weird we bring up Freedom because there seems to be a connection between that game and what we'll be talking about later on.
Yeah, a little Freedom Hayfield connection. We're going to talk about that later on. Just like yesterday, we're going to go in order, reverse order of the conference. So we're going to start things off, my man, with Falls Church.
Falls Church.
Coach
Coogan. Coach
Coogan, good guy. First year at Falls Church coming up, and just what I've heard, just talking to some other coaches about Coach Coogan, he's phenomenal in the weight room. I mean, I hear he's just a phenomenal P-Fit weight room guy. He's already, got those kids getting stronger. Just some of the notes that I took. He's been at Falls Church for 10 years, so he's a Falls Church guy.
Right. I think that's important when you're making a hire for a school like that. You need a guy who understands the culture. A lot of times people come in and they think they have an idea of what goes on at that school, and then they really try. Then they spend a year trying to understand exactly what the culture is like.
Right.
And I think, and if you have somebody who's 10 years there, can really kind of shorten the learning curve.
Right.
Because he understands the culture, he understands the kids, and he's not introducing himself where the kids are like, who is this guy? We're not sure. They know exactly who he is.
Right.
They know exactly who he is. He did say in our preview, that he feels they got a lot stronger.
Yep.
I think to your point, him being a really good weight room guy, being able to build up their strength, because obviously, again, Falls Church, smaller population of kids. You're going to have kids who are probably going both ways. Until you can get your numbers up, you're going to need your best guys to go both ways. And I think off season is huge. Off season was huge for them. They ended the year winning, correct? At the end.
A tough game against Justice, right?
Right.
They won 2-0.
Right.
Little safety.
I mean, what? And if I'm not mistaken, it was a double overtime game. I believe they went to double overtime in that game.
Did you bet the under on that one? You took the under.
I mean, that would have been the way to go. That would have been the way to go. Is to take. I mean, actually, but I'm curious how many games have ended 2-0, and a nice 2-run shot right bottom of the ninth. Little Kirk Gibson run around the bases.
That's a baseball score for sure.
Oh, 2-0. Baseball, hockey.
Low scoring baseball.
Baseball, hockey. Well, it's a soccer blowout. It's a soccer blowout.
Looking at their schedule here, I mean, this past year, they lost a close game, another OT game, unless that's the one you were thinking of earlier when you said OT, against Lewis, and that was 6-0 in OT. So, and that could have gone the other way. So they could have easily been. They could have been 2-8. Right. Easily. It's a tough schedule. You got to open up a Chantilly. That's a tough one to open up with. Marshall's always tough. And then so that's a tough schedule. They had South Lakes, and we know all. Last night we talked about South Lakes. I mean, the dream season, 10-0. They do have Annandale, and 19-0. That was a close-ish game. That could be another game where they fight.
That game was 6-0 at the end of the first half.
The Annandale game.
Yeah, so you're talking about a 1-score game, and definitely, a couple breaks go correct, go the right way for you. Who knows, right? Like you said, I mean, easily, right? With a couple breaks, they could have been 3-7.
Easily, you're right.
They could have been 3-7, and we can speak for kind of our experience playing against them 2 years ago. Those kids fight. They don't go down easy. They definitely have a lot of heart. For sure, they have a lot of heart, and I think that if what seems like Coach Coogan's doing the right thing over there, getting them strong in the weight room, kind of again understanding the culture over there. I think they've got a they're heading the right direction, right? I
agree, and retention's a big thing, like it is everywhere nowadays, right?
Right.
I mean, you bring up 2 years ago, the two best players on that team that we saw 2 years ago were still in high school last year, but they weren't there.
Right.
There was a quarterback and a receiver. I think they're Division I guys,
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. If they can retain their talent, and this goes for everybody nowadays.
Right.
Which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But if you can retain your talent, because everybody wants to go to the transfer portal, the high school transfer portal, and all that kind of stuff. You got a shot. Now they do have a couple things going on. They've lost a couple studs on their DL, OL, right? Sanchez, Soto, Manzor. Those guys were two-way guys for them.
Right.
So they're going to lose them. They lost. I actually got a connection to this squad a little bit. Some of the guys, they lost a kid named Nick DeWolf. I coached
Nick DeWolf.
I coached the Wolf in youth league. He was on one of my teams in football. And he was a fast, good safety, good receiver. So they're losing him. Now they are returning some guys that he was excited about. The running back, Boyaki. Another kid I coached, Sam Dresser, their center.
Well, oddly enough, he did also say that he might end up playing tight end. So, I mean, that tells you what kind of athlete he is, right? When you can go from the center to tight end, I mean, that speaks a lot to your athleticism, right? I mean,
good call on that. And lacrosse kid, I know he plays lacrosse. His dad was a lacrosse coach. I coached with his dad way back when youth lacrosse. It's a good family. And then you got two receivers coming back. DeWolf's younger brother. You got Minnie DeWolf.
Yeah. Not the Wolf from Pulp Fiction. He's gonna come to fix things. Is that what he's come to do?
Not Winston Wolf, but they are hungry like the Wolf. And you got Valencia, another receiver. So he's got some skill guys coming back. He's excited about.
Yeah. He has some young guys too. I know he has a couple of sophomores. I think he said that he's pretty high on as well. Sophomores Elijah Lewis and Logan Steeder. And not only that though, but he mentions that both he thinks they accept in leadership roles. And for a sophomore to step in a leadership role, it's pretty big. I mean, considering the fact they probably just got done playing freshman football, them to step up really kind of speaks to the kind of maybe character-wise of who they are. To be for a coach to mention you as a leader is pretty impressive. It's
true, especially and we know this firsthand when a team is struggling, right? When a team is struggling and has struggled for years, this before Coogan, Coach Coogan got there. And again, we speak firsthand. We've been through this as coaches. It's hard to get the young guys to take a leadership role.
Right.
Because they're afraid the older guys are going to say something to them. They're going to make fun of them. They're going to say, the negativity starts spreading a little bit. So if you got some young guys stepping up, that means some good things are happening over there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's promising. I mean, for a new coach to come in and be able to see that, he's got some young guys want to step into that leadership role really kind of helps him out, kind of takes the weight off of his shoulders. Obviously it's been since 19 since I made the playoffs. And my guess is that was probably Coach Aziz who was there doing that right before COVID happened, right before that all went down. And they played a South County team that ended up winning the state title that year. But they came out and they played pretty well. They were 5-5.
Right.
Sorry, they were 6-4. And then ended up with the loss to the eventual state champs in South County. But that just shows that you can't get things done there. Again, it's not going to be easy, right? It's going to be an uphill battle. I think anytime you're going to change the culture, it's always difficult. But it seems like he has them going in the right direction.
So transitioning over to Justice.
So Justice coming off a 2-8 season last year. In fact, back-to-back 2-8 seasons. Now the year before, so they had back-to-back 2-8 seasons. But in 2021, they went 6-5. They had a playoff appearance. So they were 6-4 throughout the season. They had a playoff appearance. Last year, they end up being Lewis and Annandale, and then of course lose the 2-0 to Falls. So I mean, again, very much similar to when we talk about Falls Church. I mean, 2-0. I mean, if they score a touchdown, they're 3-7. They're 3-7, and obviously getting a little better. They did have a sophomore who played quarterback for 5 games, Griffin Chapman. I couldn't find a lot of stats on them, but from what I did find, it did say that he played in 5 games. So they had a sophomore. The question is, they have a new coach, and they also had a coach that got hired in May, and that's a real big uphill battle to do a hire then. The offseason is pretty much done. And those kids by the time he got hired were 3 weeks from being out the door. and it's hard to get them to kind of wrangle them back in, especially when they don't know you at all, right? I mean, they have known you for exactly a hot second. Trying to get them to be in it, that makes it for a really difficult situation. Get a hire that late can make things really difficult for your program.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm looking at their schedule. It's tough, right? And it's sort of unfortunate. And I know we haven't gotten to the Liberty. We'll talk about Herndon, but they open up with Herndon. And, a few years ago, if you're, the powers that be at Justice and you're putting this together, that would have made sense.
Right.
Herndon was on a streak of, they were 0-27 at one point.
Right. Well, actually, and when they made that schedule, they were still roughly on that streak. Probably they're probably still on that streak at the time, right?
So it would have made sense. And now, who knew that Herndon would have kind of a renaissance and turn things around the way they did and become kind of a powerhouse, sort of. And so that's unfortunate. Langley, the last few years has been outstanding. And there would have been times in the past where they would have played Langley, and that might have been so they the schedule was just kind of, sometimes luck is a part of all this. Right. When do you play a team? When do you see a team? Right. I felt like Justice kind of ran into some of these teams at the wrong time. Westfield. Now I have my own thoughts on this. I mean, honestly, if I look at Westfield over the last 5, let's just say 5, you can go back 20 years to Westfield, right? They're always good. Right. There's always a solid program. I don't think a program like Westfield should even be playing a program like Justice. In my opinion, I don't think it makes sense.
Well, and I think so. I'll speak from the perspective of coming from outside of the state. This is the first state I've ever been in where the DSA determines your schedule. In the other 2 states I've coached in, the head coach determines your schedule, and you can call whoever you want. So usually you try to find like teams. I mean, that's normally what you want to do. You normally want to find a team that's like you, so that way you go into that game. I come from California. You're not going to call St. John Bosco up and ask them if they want a game if you're Justice, right? Oddly enough, they will call you, but you'll be like, yeah, we're good, we're okay. So I do think it's really interesting here that the DSA, and I guess speaking with other coaches, they try to make a above team, a like you team, and a below you team, and I don't know exactly how that helps you out. I think especially when you're struggling program, right? Justice back 2 and 8 years,
and we've been there. We
absolutely, yeah.
We know, so we're not even. This is not even. I'm not saying this trying to be negative about anyone, or I'm actually speaking as if I was the coach,
right?
I would want, like you said, I'd want to play like teams, and if I wasn't playing like teams, I'd want to go like a notch above, right? Like a little bit better,
right?
Challenge my kids, but I don't need to play a team that is competing for a state title.
Right.
Right.
When you're trying to build a program, right? When you're trying to build a program,
that's it.
You want to try to get your kids in the best. And coaches, right? Coaches in general are pretty competitive, and they're not going to run from a fight. And so, they're going to go out and they're going to coach their kids the best they can against the competition that they can. But on the flip side, you want to put your kids in the best position you can available. So I think that a team like Justice would hope that the DSA would take into account who they want to play. And again, the rule of someone way above you, and someone having to play someone way above you, I don't know. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure people scheduled Herndon as being the team below them. And we're good when we get to Liberty. And turns out that's not the case, right? Now all of a sudden they're really good, and teams can make that turnaround. But I think that when you are trying to build your program up like that, it can make things difficult.
No, I agree. Looking at the schedule as far as the rest of the games, it got really good with when they played Annandale, and they beat Annandale 14-12. Good battle there, and then they won back-to-back games, and they beat Lewis, scoring 34 points. Again, and Lewis had a pretty good defense.
Yeah, no.
That was a good win and a good performance. 34 points. And they ended up with that loss to Falls Church in a tough game. And it was cold, not the best weather. So late in the season, things happen like that. Some promising. I think the Annandale and Lewis, right? Those are 2 promising games for them, and they can build off of that. I mean, again, you're talking 3 wins, 4 wins, 5 wins. You got to 500 almost, right? I mean, that would be a nice turnaround. And so Coach Wallace, he's got some things to turn around. I think, again, Lewis, Annandale, he gets those 2 wins. Falls Church, 3 wins. At this point, you don't know who's lost who in the conference, who is, who's graduated, that kind of thing. He could easily, win 4, 5, 6 games.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think very similar to what we talked about last night or, yesterday with the Concord. There's going to be a bunch of teams, right? Who's going to have their kids ready to go, or what kids are going to be able to fill their roles really quickly. And that's going to be a key. That's going to be key for them.
Right. All right. So moving on to Annandale. And, I'm a local guy, Woodson guy, went to Woodson, Annandale, old rivalry, so I followed Annandale growing up. I mean, they had some dominant teams in the 90s under Coach Adams. It'd be nice to see Annandale kind of become that powerhouse again, and kind of I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting a lot for Annandale and Coach Baggett. That's a brand new coach this year. He's been around Annandale, and one thing talking to him, he is encourages, and I know a lot of coaches encourage multi-sport athletes, but that's a big thing for Coach Baggett is the multi-sport athletes.
Well, I think when you have a school population like they do at Annandale, a little bit on the smaller side, you want to make sure you don't chase away the kids who play other sports, right? You may have kids who are not football first kids. They might be basketball first kids, might be baseball first kids, might be wrestling first kids. But you want to let them know, that football is something that they can do during the fall, that they can really help out their school with. I think that's important for most schools. I think don't have the luxury of being able to push kids away or to tell kids, you have to play football only. There are some powerhouse schools that absolutely can happen. But I think that, when you are trying to rebuild a program, it behooves you to make sure that you have kids playing. And the other thing is you want kids competing year round, right? I mean, if they're not going to be lifting, but if they're competing year round, it's just going to help your program. So,
Yeah. And I think a lot of coaches do say that, they want multi-sport athletes. Mm-hmm. Although come off season time when guys aren't showing up in the weight room and that kind of thing, sometimes coaches are like, I wish they weren't playing on the sport right now. I wish they were here. But Coach Baggett, I believe that he believes it. He was excited. Mm-hmm. One of the first things he mentioned was one of his students, Lopez, was second in the region in wrestling. He had some students that finished really well in track in the relays. Yeah. So he was really, really excited about some of his guys that were playing other sports. Key losses that Coach Baggett's going to have. He lost a couple skill guys. He lost Flores and Ofosu.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple receivers. So he's got to kind of find, guys to replace those guys.
He's got a running back linebacker, Don Vajek, 5'11", 200 pounds. That's a load. I mean, wow. that's a load to deal with, right? I mean, yes. that kind of size in high school, really does translate well, right? I mean, especially if you're going to be trying to be a physical football team, right. That is short, compact, and definitely definitely difficult to bring to the ground, right?
Oh yeah.
So looking at their schedule from last year, they got Falls Church, they got Lewis, they ended up playing Rockridge at the end of the season, which I thought was interesting. It was a 2-score loss to them. The Justice game, again, a 2-point loss.
Yeah.
So, you're talking about, again, 3-7 right there. Marshall, 6-point loss. So, I mean, you get 2 different scores, 2 more scores in those games, right? Scoring each one of those games. And all of a sudden now you are 4-6. You're 4-6 and definitely knocking at the door, right?
I agree. And one thing about Annandale, like I said, knowing that district pretty well and growing up around there, they border a district with Lake Braddock, a little bit of Woodson as well, and neighboring with Lake Braddock, neighboring with Woodson. So they do have some, they get some football players. They get some Annandale youth kids. They get Braddock Road youth kids.
Yeah.
They get some Alexandria youth kids as well sometimes. So, I've said it for a while. I think Annandale, has, kind of the things in the building. And I think the right guy is going to come in. And I think Baggett could be that guy, start turning things around over there.
Yeah. I mean, remember I did hear someone talk about, I can't remember. They said they went to Annandale and they said that there were some pretty impressive kids walking through those hallways. So again, kind of going back to my same thing, right? You got to recruit the hallways. which I'm sure he's trying to do, but it's kind of getting those kids into the fold. And I think the two sport philosophy is definitely probably going to play off for him this year.
Yep. Quarterback. They have a quarterback. They've had quarterbacks in the past as well. By the way, they get feeders from Ansel Little League.
Yeah,
it's a pretty good Little League baseball program, and so they get kids who can throw a little bit. I remember what was it? It was the COVID year.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good Annandale team. Now I know, the playoffs were all messed up that year, so there wasn't as many teams and all that. But that was they had a good quarterback, and they had a good team.
Well, they were 5-2 that year. Well, probably 6-1. My guess is they had that COVID thing. Had it been a regular year, I mean, when we saw them that COVID year, they were impressive. They had a really good quarterback. They had a really good running back. They had some things. So that tells you that Annandale definitely can come up and have some players
for sure. So I'm excited about Annandale and see what they can do this year. Jumping over to Lewis. That's another one that I do have some ties to that area. I used to teach at Key Middle School, and I loved my years at Key. We had some phenomenal football players back then at Key that went to Lewis. Coach Choates is I think doing a great job over there, kind of turning things around. He just had his best year since 2018. Best year at Lewis since 2018. He sent 2 players, I think, to play in college this year. Got one kid with the Bridgewater, one kid going to Lewis and Clark College. Okay. I mean, that's big stuff, man. His OC from last year just got hired at Osborne Park. I mean, that's sending kids to college. His assistants are getting hired as head coaches other places. Right. This guy's turning things around.
Right. He had all-region O-lineman and Edgar Lagos as well, which again is big for them, right? That means that he's doing something right over there. He's not only that though, but in region meetings, he's getting kids recognized, right? He's got kids that other coaches, football in particular is difficult to try to get kids in there, but he was able to get an all-region player. I mean, so that means we're talking about region, so we're talking about between both the national and the Patriot, right? For him to be all-region is huge. Now all-region and without making the playoffs. Normally the all-region spots go towards kids who are in the playoffs. It's pretty difficult. Pretty difficult to kind of make all region, and for him to be able to go there and advocate for his kid and get him all region is pretty big.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Moving forward, so he has an end, Daniel Wynn, that he thinks is going to be pretty good, and then he has a couple sophomores. Joel Smith looks like he's going to be pretty good DB, and then he has some seniors, Jamal Cisse, Brian Cantarero should also be. He thinks they're going to be key contributors for them as well.
Yeah, and the Cisse's, there's been a lot of Cisse's at Lewis over the years.
Okay.
And it's a good football family. So I think expect good things from young Jamal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good to have that kind of tradition through there, right? And I think that's good too. I mean, the promising thing for that is when I was coaching in Long Beach, I went my alma mater was Milliken. It's the first place I ever taught at. And we had a kid named Alden Darby who could have gone. So California is the wild, wild west, and he could have left and gone anywhere he wanted to. He could have gone to Long Beach Poly. He had a lot of places that were kind of recruiting, high schools that were recruiting him to go places because of the way you can transfer in California. And he chose to stay at the school. He chose to stay at a school that, we were struggling. Oddly enough, it was our first, he ended up leading us against our first win against Poly since 85 with a team that had like Mark Carrier on it and Leonard Russell. Long Beach Poly is pretty good in football. But he chose to stay. And I think character-wise, if you have a kid who's pretty talented like that, and he chooses to stay, I think that speaks volumes to the kind of kid he is, right? Because nowadays kids don't like to hang, they're kids who it seems like they kind of go where the grass is greener. But if you have a kid who goes to his home school and wants to be the man, I think that speaks a lot to character-wise. And
you won that game. You guys won that game. Good for you guys. You guys were like the Texas State Armadillos in that game.
We were won it in double overtime. Yeah, it was pretty impressive. It was pretty impressive.
Nice.
They were, yeah. But yeah, so with him staying home like that and not, looking to transfer out or looking to, go private or something like that, I think that and that speaks well to lots of the head coach, right?
Yes, it does.
For them to be able to believe in him like that's pretty impressive.
Yep. So open up with Parkview. I mean, look at that score. That was a close game. That could have gone either way. That was a shootout.
Right.
We talked about the circumstances of playing certain teams in certain years, and you never know what's going to happen. I mean, McLean was a really good team last year.
Right. Well, they had a big turnaround. They had a big turnaround. Right. We'll talk more about the delivery, but they
WNL as well. I mean, just kind of a wild stuff that happened over there in that region last year. Mount Vernon, we haven't gotten to Mount Vernon yet, but they were one of the three-way ties for the conference, obviously. So Edison as well. TJ in that game, good solid victory over TJ. Loss against Justice, but a close game. Right away, you look at the Justice game, TJ, Parkview. That's 3 wins. You could probably find another win or two in there. That's 5 wins.
Right. Well, the Annandale, it was 21-0 at the end of the first. Now, 3 scores is a lot, but then nobody scores in the third quarter. So that means, it's back and forth between those two teams. So, if they're able to get a couple touchdowns there, you're talking about a 21-14 game going into the fourth quarter. And I'm thinking in high school football, that is definitely something that can happen, right? I mean, guys score through here, score through there. I think that speaks a lot to, where they could be, right?
And one thing that Coach Choate mentioned, they are junior heavy, right? Like last year, and a lot of those guys played, so they're bringing back an experienced team now.
Right.
This is it. This is their year. They played a lot of juniors last year. Now you're ready. Let's go get it now.
Right. So it seems like they had a good offseason, and it seems like they're ready to go.
Right. All right. Moving on to Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon Majors. Coach Taylor, kind of excited to see what he brings to the table here. They really surprised some people last year, I thought, with some of those wins. And that schedule, like you said, is brutal.
Yeah, those four games are not easy. Definitely a murderer's row, if you will.
So they opened up with West Potomac, 19-16.
Yeah.
I mean, close game. That could have gone. That could have gone either way. Week 2, Westfield. Westfield is what it is. FCA and out of the area in week 3.
Well, I think going back to week 1, West Potomac ended up being a pretty good football team.
Yes, they did.
Right, and so actually, if I remember correctly, I think Mount Vernon was up in that game. I think I remember us being out in the rain. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Mount Vernon was up early in that game, and West Potomac came roaring back.
I think you're correct on that.
I think I could be wrong on that, but I think they came roaring back. I think it might have been two-score lead for Mount Vernon.
The story with Mount Vernon season last year was how they finished. Right, let's be honest. It's how they finished. They finished off hot, man. They 1, 2, 3, 4. They won 4 or 5 games at the end of the season.
Yeah, not just that though.
5 of 6. Sorry, 5 of 6 games.
Not just that though, but they had a sophomore, Matthew Moret. He had his biggest game against Lake Braddock. He had 8 catches, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns in that playoff game. I mean, as a sophomore, and I think we can all agree, Lake Braddock was a pretty good football team last year.
Yeah,
and to put for a sophomore to put those kind of numbers is really big. They return their leading passer, their leading rusher, and their leading receiver. And like I said, for a sophomore to have those kind of numbers, actually going into his numbers, he had for the year 48 catches, 731 yards, and 10 touchdowns as a sophomore. I mean, and he just got better as the year went on. And again, his best game was against. I guess you don't have to argue it was the best team in the region because they won the region championship against Lake Braddock. So it seems that Mount Vernon's got something cooking over there. And again, going back to they played a bunch of young guys, and they're all coming back. The quarterback Hudson Grimsley, he ended up with about 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns. His biggest game, he had 251 yards passing and 3 touchdowns against Lewis. His biggest rushing it was against Edison. He had 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it looks like he's a dual threat kind of guy. I mean, 14 carries for a quarterback is a lot.
Yeah,
but he's had 2 big games, right? He had big game passing and a big game rushing. I mean, it looks like they've got something over there with him, and especially with the receiver coming back, I think that's going to be a pretty deadly combination for them over there.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say about what we should mention first off, it was a 3-way tie, right, for the conference between them, Edison, and Hayfield. Yeah. So 3-way tie for the conference. Now the PowerPoints determined obviously the seeding for the for the playoffs, and it seemed like there was no consistency over there in that conference, though, because I'm looking at they beat Edison, but Edison beat Hayfield, right? So it was kind of like, but then Hayfield beat them.
Right.
So it really was kind of like, and that's why they tied, I guess, at the end of the day. But it's interesting kind of looking at the scores. And it's not just with Mount Vernon. It's with a lot of these teams. It was like, you you'd play one common opponent, but then that common opponent would beat the other team. And there was a lot of that happening over there.
Well, it seems a lot of parity, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of parity at the top and the bottom of the district. You know, where the top teams to beat each other, the bottom teams to all beat each other. There seems to be just kind of parity throughout. So, you know, that's what makes that district pretty interesting is the amount of week in, week out, you're never quite sure exactly who's going to win. You know, in at least last year, right? I mean, all of a sudden you hear this team beat that team, and you're like, wait, how was that even possible? You know, again, if you're going to good old MGM to lay down the money, you know, I think you lose a lot of money betting the national. I think you lose a lot of money just week to week trying to bet the spread over there.
All right. So moving on to Edison, one of the other three-way ties for first place. And Edison, I got to lead off with it because this is a big deal, right? As the president once said, it was a big effing deal. Okay, for them to beat Hayfield, that's a huge rivalry, and some people say it's the first time in history. And we looked it up. We went back to the 90s, and it's the first time since what 90? What'd you find?
Well, so it was 14 straight wins for 14 straight wins for the good old Hayfield Hawks. You know, it was the first loss at least in the last 15 games. As far back as we can find, as those of you guys know out there, it can be difficult to kind of find stats on that. But we went back. There's a few sites that they go back to 99, and it was a 14. Now, not all those games were blowouts. Quite a few of the games were 1-point games. So it wasn't like it was a dominating 14-0. There were a lot of close games. There was about the 2010s, a little bit past there. You know, you had those really talented Hayfield teams. Those games were not close, but it seems like it's coming back down to earth. It seems, you know, Hayfield kind of pulled away from it, and now they've kind of come back. At least last year, they've gotten even. And again, a huge win, right? Huge win. The other thing about Edison is that they've increased their win total for the last 3 years. They've gone from 2 wins to 3 wins to 6 wins to 7 wins. Again, credit to what they're doing over there, right? I mean, to keep those kids going, keep that win total going up. I know they had to be disappointed with their loss. I know a lot of people came into last season feeling like this was Edison's year. This was the year that they were finally going to pull it off and win the national. As much as I know they're happy, right? Again, an increase in win total. I don't think that was their ultimate goal. I think their ultimate goal was to go ahead and win the whole thing, in which I think everybody thought, you know, that they had a really good shot at doing this year. I know we saw them a few times at 7-on-7s, and you know we all thought they looked pretty good.
Yeah, they did look good at the 7-on-7s last year, and we liked their quarterback.
Yeah,
I think he led that conference in touchdowns. He had a phenomenal year. They had a great offense that year last year, and they came out of the gates. They had a tough game against WNL. We talked about this earlier. WL had a great season last year, but they came in week 2 and they beat a solid Langley team.
Yeah,
that was a good win in week 2. All of a sudden, you're like, hey, this might be a different, you know, Edison team.
Right. And
then they lose a close one to McLean in week 3, and we find out at the end of the year that was a really good McLean team.
Right.
And that was a close game.
Right.
We knew early on, right there, that told you, you know, looking back on it, that told you what you were looking at. You were looking at a pretty solid Edison team. Then they go on a tear.
Well, every game they play after that, other than the Mount Vernon game, they win by 2 scores.
Yeah,
they beat every team by 2 scores. They go on a rip. They go on this run at the very end, and you know they get to the very last game, which is essentially right is essentially for the district championship. And just, you know, it's one of those things, you know, being in that game for the first time, you know, I'm sure, you know, it was a 1-score game. I hadn't got a chance to watch it, but you know, it just at the very end, it's kind of and the on any Friday night, right? Any Friday night, someone can come up and kind of bite you in the behind, and so it looks like that's what happened.
Yeah, and it does tell you that Mount Vernon team, by the way, and I know because I had some questions. They had some guys come back from injury that last game of the season, so Edison lost that game to Mount Vernon, but it could be a fun rematch, by the way, this year.
Yeah.
And then, but to tell you how good Edison was last year, they played Fairfax in round 1 of the playoffs. That was a good Fairfax team. That's a Fairfax team that a week later blows out South County. Right. And they put it. This game was close in the second half.
Right. Yeah. The game was still in doubt in the second half, right?
Yes, it was.
And I think to your point, that same team who turns around the next week and blows out South County, right?
Yep.
So I mean that kind of speaks to the fight in Edison last year.
Yeah, there's some good things happening at Edison. So I'm really excited to see what Coach Lewis can do this year, knowing that, they finished so strong last year. Now, you lost your quarterback, right? That's a good quarterback at that. It's a big loss. But Coach Lewis is doing some good things over there, and I'm excited to see what they can do.
Yeah, so am I. All right. That leaves one team left.
Okay, so we're moving on to Hayfield.
The Hayfield Hawks.
We're at the end of the road here. The end of the road. We worked our way from last year's bottom to last year's top, and a lot to be said here. Well, we'll let you kind of kick things off here.
So, anything happened at Hayfield interesting this year? I wasn't aware. I've been in a coma for less. No, I have not. So
hang on. I can answer that question for you. We can call the Fairfax Times. They can tell us.
So Hayfield has a brand new coach, and Coach Overton, Daryl Overton. So I think I'll kind of take us to the timeline of all this. We're only going to talk about this once. We only want to talk about football, but I think some of the stuff needs to be addressed because I'm sure people listen to this and they're curious. Not that anyone really cares what you and I have to say, but I think people care about what anyone has to say, period, about Hayfield. So let's kind of talk. So, around January, I want to say, we hear that Coach Aziz has been fired, which made things really interesting because normally you don't fire a 2-for-2 district championship coach. So we hear he is fired. And then the rumors already start, right? The rumors already start that Coach Overton is coming to Hayfield. It is a done deal. I heard that from people that I know, people that don't necessarily operate in telling lies. But my argument was I had heard the year before that he was going to John Paul the Great. It was a done deal. He was signed, sealed, delivered. He was going to John Paul the Great. And I was, again, not being from the area, I'm like, why would you leave a school that you are currently in process of getting a three-peat? So a bunch of time goes by. They're not hiring a head coach, which is really interesting. Right? They're not. They have interviews, and then nothing happens. Right? There is no head coach that is announced, and eventually it does come to pass that Coach Overton is coming to Hayfield, and then the rumors instantly start. Just crazy amount of stuff. Coming out, I think maybe we'll just play ping pong here. I'll say a rumor I heard, and Coach Dash will say a rumor he heard coming out. So the first thing I heard is that the day he was hired, there were 35 kids in line at student services, registering from the school. I heard they essentially said the whole Hayfield team had en masse taken a city bus to Hayfield High School, gotten off from Woodbridge, and enrolled. That was the first rumor that I heard. What's the rumor you heard from over there?
I'm trying to remember. There was just so much stuff coming out at that point. We started hearing rumors about they're getting this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy from Gonzaga, DeMatha, Bosco, IMG. At one point, someone said that it was like, remember Fantastic Voyage? Is that Coolio? Yeah. They were driving up and guys were just jumping in their car and they were coming. I mean, come on, man. The stories were ridiculous.
So then, all right. So we'll keep on going back and forth. Let's see how many rumors we can talk about. What we heard, and again, these are all rumors. These are all things that were told to us. That I was told that he was buying apartment houses. He was buying apartment complexes and bringing in kids from up and down the Eastern Seaboard. He was bringing in talent. He essentially was going to have dorms. These kids were going to live by their own. That was another rumor I heard.
People spend so much time. There was one that he was hanging out with Elvis. That Coach Overton was hanging with Elvis in the Bahamas. I heard that one. I mean, the rumors and the innuendo, and it's wild. It's really wild, and it's unfortunate because then people start talking about other things other than football, right, and then you go from those rumors, right, and there was meetings going on and associations were meeting and all that kind of stuff. And then you all of a sudden, the Fairfax Times comes out with an article. And that was, I think, the first major kind of bombshell outside of parents and coaches talking, about it.
Well, so I think the media was talking about it. I was at an event. My sister-in-law is an officer in the U.S. Navy, and they have a promotion ceremony. that they go through when they have this big, it's big formal thing. And so the realtor who had sold us our house lives in the West Springfield district, and her son had been playing football at the time that we bought our house. And so I said, "Hey, how you doing? You know, nice at ease. Oh, your son playing football? No, he's playing lacrosse." And I was like, "Okay." And so this person, who I know has nothing to do with any coaching, anything. She's a realtor in Fairfax. Was like, "What's going on at Hayfield?" I mean, just the amount of people who all of a sudden were very interested with what was going on over there was and don't get me wrong, people were interested because they, I'm sure, had heard the same things. They had, you know, people's interests were that because of him coming to Fairfax and all these things coming. At the very least, you knew the best player in the state was coming with him. I mean, obviously they share the same last name. The best player in the state was coming with him. So I mean that's just that alone, right? That alone is going to spark interest. But let alone the guy who, not just the best, the guy coming the best player in the state, but the current reigning back-to-back state championship coach.
Right. Now, what do we know for sure? Well, aside from nothing, right? We do know that as of right now, as of you and I filming this tonight, and any write-ups that we've gotten from Coach Overton, there has been no official, as far as we know, decisions or anything like that. Nothing looks like, as of right this second, that all is good and all is going to be good come August.
Right, and I think I kind of cut you off in the thing with the Fairfax Times pieces. That made things really interesting as well. As far as like you found out who was involved writing them.
Yeah, I mean, I think once people did, it was big bombshells. Once you started talking about people's finances and that kind of stuff, now it's not like, to me, it seemed a little bit kind of like almost National Enquirer-ish at that point, right? And then you start digging deeper and you find out the person writing the article just, was involved in a lawsuit with this. Then I was like, all right, you know what? I'm not watching Crossfire. I'm not watching Real Time with Bill Maher. I mean, what is this? Like, what's going on here? This is supposed to be football.
Right.
So that I tuned out at that point when I saw that they had essentially political writers getting involved and writing about football.
Right.
That didn't smell right to me.
Right. So I
was lost at that point.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate. If people want to have a conversation about what's wrong with high school football right now, I think that's a conversation to be had. Again, I'll come back to the California is the wild, wild west. Kids are moving all the time. So here in Fairfax, right? You have to pay to go to cross county lines, all these really, 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 really hard things. Until recently, you could go wherever you wanted, anytime you wanted. You would have kids who were freshmen would leave because they knew they could play varsity, the next week for their school. So they would leave and be on a varsity team, within a week. So yeah, if you want to have a conversation about what's going on, and if any of the things going on at Hayfield were true, then yes, there needs to be conversations. Right. I know in basketball, and if anybody out there wants to maybe tweet us and let me know if I'm incorrect on this, but you can't be an AAU coach and be a high school head coach. You can't have both. I believe that's my understanding. Is that you can't have an AAU team and be a varsity head coach.
It comes down to the percentages, I think, of the kids on the AAU team.
Right. So if you want to argue that that the PME organization is an AAU team and that shouldn't be allowed, then I think that's a conversation you can have. If you want to argue about the transfer rules, if you want to argue about how that works, there was a rule in California that said you could not follow your head coach. If your head coach went to another school, the only real transfer they'd ever block, that CIF, which essentially is our VHSL, they would block. You could not follow a head coach to another school. They said no. That's not, because obviously we're not all dumb. We know what that is. Head coach goes into a school, he brings all his kids with him. I mean we're not dumb. That was the one rule that they would block. And if you want to have that conversation again about being upset about the way the rules are bent or broken and the way they get around it, then have that conversation. I think that's a fair conversation. But I think to have the conversation of innuendo, because I think that if anybody had the actual proof, somebody would say. So those articles in particular, it's always sources say names. No one's ever named anything.
Right.
And the problem you also come with district wise is you can't talk about minors.
Yep.
People want to be upset at the McKinney-Vento Act, which I learned about years ago because there was a school in a lot of schools in California use it, but there was one school in particular that was in our league that was using it at the time. And if you want to talk about how people were taking advantage of that. That being said, if a kid's saying he's homeless, you can't out that kid. You just can't, because the issue is that that rule's in place to protect these kids. Because the rule, and unfortunately, I say all the time, there are football coaches who take advantage of that rule. There's the accusation that Overton is taking advantage of that rule. There's been no proof of it at all. But I know for a fact, I mean, I'm not going to name names. I do know coaches who have taken advantage of that rule in California. But they've taken advantage of that rule. But you can't just change the rules because you don't like how it affects the football squad. Because that rule's in place. So a homeless child who's going through crisis can, while getting an education, yes, it really is so those kids can eat, because they can get free and reduced lunch at that school. So at least they get breakfast and lunch every day. And I will say this to anybody out there, if anyone out there listening does take advantage of that rule, I mean, don't do that. It's just it's not good karma. Don't do that.
Well, another thing, and in reading these reports on this whole situation, Fairfax Times and all that stuff, and reading the comments, things get real fiery, right, in the comments. Yeah. And, one of the things that I heard people say a lot is, well, Hayfield is doing what other schools have done in the past. Maybe other schools didn't do it quite as big and quite as, right? This is what I did read someone say, but they're just doing kind of a similar thing, what other schools have done. And if that's the case, then, you wonder, why are these teams complaining if they were doing it, previously as well? Now, were they not doing it as good? Were they not doing it as big? Were they not doing it as, I don't know. But that's an argument that's being made the other way.
Right. And I think to your point again, no one knows anything really. Everybody thinks they know. Everybody, it's the old, where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, I think that, that questions need to be asked. Absolutely. Questions need to be asked. I do think the other problem, though, is the silence coming out of everything, right? You have accusations being made. You have the county saying that they're investigating. It's kind of what infuriates a lot of people, right? They say they've said, hey, this is what's going on. And then in turn,
Well, I do wonder, one side kind of made their complaints. One side went to the newspapers. One side, called, Greta Van Susteren or whoever, and they wrote an article. One side did all that stuff, and they got what they wanted. It became a big story and all that. It got the investigation going, the so-called investigation, I guess, that's being reported in the paper. And if that investigation happens, which is what they wanted, and nothing comes of it, and they say, the county says, hey, we looked, they have documentation that they live in this house and that house and or whatever it is that other side going to say, oh, okay, we're good? Are they going to accept that?
Right. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, the whole thing is a mess. The whole thing is a mess.
Big mess. And it's a bummer because we want to talk about football.
That's it. And I think this will be the last time we talk about any of this stuff, unless something major happens.
Yes.
If not, as far as you and I are concerned, we're going to talk about Hayfield football, because that's what that's what you and I want to talk about. We did not get into here to do political commentary, but I think it would be what's what I'm looking for. I would think it would be disingenuous of us to talk about Hayfield and just kind of not talk about everything that had kind of gone on. And let me go again. You and I know nothing at all. We've heard the rumors like everybody else. Some people say that they kind of know things. They kind of don't know things. They say the thing I hear the most is I've heard.
Yep.
But who did you hear that from? Like,
if
you have some hard evidence, like, stand with 10 toes down and put your name on it, like say it, and if you're and if someone's willing to take a stand with them, I'll listen to everything they have to say, and I just think again it's unfortunate that right now we had to spend a while talking about something that we politically and we could probably have a 3-part miniseries on just all the things that are kind of tied up into this, and but we don't want to do that. We want to talk about high school football, and
we want to talk about high school football
and talk about these kids, right? Because that's what we're kind of here to do. So,
all right, so that's the deal. Unless another bombshell drops, something huge, some kind of resolution maybe to all this, or Wolf Blitzer's talking about it on TV. All right, but aside from that, I don't even know if he's working anymore. But we'll go ahead.
Is Wolf Blitzer still on?
I'm not even sure. Larry King, is he still on the air?
Larry King, big Dodger fan, always at the Dodger game. Larry King.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
I think he's just sitting next to Mary Hart. This is getting away from us. I think.
All right, so now we're going to talk Hayfield football.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's talk Hayfield football. A couple things. We were able to, we were in contact with Coach Overton, talking about football, not talking about, other stuff. And, obviously, he didn't know much about, the some of the kids who left. There are some kids who left Hayfield. He didn't know much about, that. He's focusing on who stayed and who's there.
Right.
And he says they've gotten stronger. They've been working in the weight room. He's excited about that. He did say the one thing I will say, bringing back some of this stuff, the noise. He says just the noise and the controversy and that kind of stuff that's going on out there outside their walls. Yeah. He said that's brought them closer together.
Well, it's one of the things, right? You kind of circle the wagons, right? Good old Chris Berman, circle the wagons, right? I mean, that's sometimes when things like that go on, it brings those guys together. And what's unfortunate, and not to keep on behooving the fact on this, is that, you have a lot of kids there who now feel like everybody hates them. Right. I mean, Ian Hall is a Hayfield kid.
Yeah.
I had spoken to a few of the coaches about Ian Hall before this whole thing happened, and they were really high on this kid. That kid, he's a Navy commit. And he played at Hayfield last year.
Yep.
So, those kids again are feeling that kind of heat again, feeling like, the world is against them. Those Hayfield kids out there, and that's unfortunate. But like I said, Ian Hall, from the people I've talked to about him, who coached him, we know a few people on the old Hayfield staff are really high on this kid. They think that, and obviously the kid's gonna be playing Division I football next year, which is pretty impressive.
So what you're saying is that nobody circles the wagons like Coach Overton and your Hayfield Hawks. I like that. Mateo Kamarak, linebacker, defensive lineman. They like him a lot. 6'1", 205. These are Hayfield guys.
Yeah, Hayfield. Cardell Hunt, another guy from last year's team. I mean, they've got the sizes. Hayfield had some talent coming back anyway, right? Yes, I mean, and again, as of this right now, you and I do not know who's currently on Hayfield's roster. So, but the kids he's listed, the kids, I went back and watched some of their Hunter film. They're pretty talented.
Yep,
they're pretty talented. Now, obviously, the most talented kid on our team is Jeffrey Overton. He's the reigning offensive player of the year. I mean, and the kid's a stud. I mean, I don't know. He's obviously a Virginia Tech commit, which is pretty impressive, right? The kid decided to stay home. And I think maybe you can speak to some a little more. Not a lot of Virginia kids staying home late.
Right.
Those kids are leaving.
No, that's true. They did lose, not from Hayfield, but he's bringing in his offense.
Yeah.
Right. So he graduated last year from the previous school, the quarterback. So he's got to find another quarterback to kind of run his offense. Right. Now you could be cynical and be like, "You mean hand the ball off?" Well, no. That quarterback last year threw for 70 touchdowns. He broke some kind of Virginia State record in touchdowns.
Yeah.
So now some of those were short throws, but not all of them were short throws. So the kid was smart. The kid knew football because he wasn't a big kid. So he was savvy. He was smart. He could move a little bit. And they got to replace that. You got to replace that. So that's always a tough one to fill. Some receivers. They graduated a couple of receivers last year from Freedom who were really good receivers.
Right.
They got to replace some of those guys. So they graduated some really good players from Freedom that everyone keeps saying, "Oh, this Freedom team is what the Hayfield team now is." Well, some of those guys are gone. They graduated from Freedom.
Right.
So last I checked, he's not bringing kids who graduated from Freedom back for another year of football. He's got some holes to fill.
Right.
And it'll be interesting to see how he goes about doing it.
Right. And I know he put Riverdale Baptist, I believe it's a Maryland team, on the schedule to replace. I'm not sure who exactly replaced on the schedule from last year. Oh, it might have been Wakefield. I think Wakefield. He replaced Wakefield off the schedule. But they do open against West Springfield, who has the I believe he was was he not the Region D player, offensive player of the year?
Offensive player of the year, phenomenal. And we'll get to the Patriot next week. But phenomenal scat back.
Yeah.
Lightning fast.
Yeah.
So that could be a fun game.
Now, what I think is going to be really interesting is his game against South County. South County, obviously Coach Pannoni is a legend, right, in the area. His special teams is probably without peer.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, me and Coach Pannoni share a common background. He went to coach in Rio Rancho for a couple of years. I coached in Rio Rancho as well when I was there. In fact, one of the coaches he was there with, I coached freshmen with at the time. And they all had the one thing they talked about is his preparation on and I know it's not South County, but it's going to be interesting, right? You're going to have the savvy coach, right? The savvy veteran coach, with South County, who's obviously going to be talented. South County year in and year out, right? A perennial contender. That's a game right there that you definitely have to circle on your calendar. I mean,
we're going to that
game to go watch. If there's a game to go watch, I think we had talked about in the first pod to go cover. I mean, that's a game, right? You're going to want to see. South County and Hayfield. I think that that's going to be one of the marquee matchups, right? That's going to be that's the Sunday night game of the week, right? That's the one that you.
Well, yeah. Here's what in my head. This is what I envision, right? I envision, and we were talking about this. We're big wrestling fans, right? Back in the day, and they were out there and playing Hilton and some of those teams, Potomac Falls, and some of those teams out there. Now you're coming here. Now you're coming to Fairfax. Now you're coming to this region. You're coming to Pannoni's region.
Yeah.
Right. You're coming to Pannoni's region, and it kind of reminds me of Kevin Nash and Bischoff. Right. This is where the big boys play. Okay. Now, what's going to be Overton's response to that? Is it going to be we don't play? And is he going to powerbomb South County? This is what everybody wants to see. This is the heavyweight battle.
Yes, absolutely. Right? Yeah, this is definitely a matchup you want to see. I mean, just kind of wrestling thing, right? This is we're getting Ric Flair at a WCW fighting Hulk Hogan at a WWF, right? The two teams that the two championship level guys are kind of going at it, right? So that should be interesting. And South County doesn't back down from anybody.
Right.
South County will come out there, chest going, and Coach Pannoni and South County are pretty much willing to go anytime, anywhere.
Yes.
So I think that again, you're going to circle that on your calendar, and you're going to say, you know what, this is definitely a game. It's going to be standing room only, right? I'm sure people are going to be standing around the track. People are going to stand in their cars. It's going to be what high school football should be, right? It's going to be action packed and everybody involved. Fans are going to be cheering.
It's going to be wild.
Yeah.
It's going to be absolutely wild. You're right. It's going to be wrestling atmosphere. It's going to be people holding, John 316, Stone Cold 316 signs up. I'm serious. And if South County really wants to get in and have fun with this, South County needs to step up and say, hey, you know what? This is our region. This is our region. Historically, I don't mean this past year. I know Braddock won it last year, but this is ours. You talk about Ric Flair? What did Ric Flair always say?
To be the man,
you got to beat the man. And if I'm South County, if I'm Pannoni, that's what I'm saying. Let's go. Let's settle out on the football field. Enough of newspaper articles and all this dumb stuff. By the way, that West Springfield game in week 1, don't take that one like that. That is going to be a good game.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And also, right, playing conference opponents, you never know, right? You never know who's going to jump up and bite you. There were years, again, I'm a big USC guy. My dad went to SC, so I grew up rooting for SC a lot. And, there were a lot of the Pete Carroll years, they were really good.
Yeah.
And then they'd go to Oregon State and lose. Or they go, they go to Cal and lose to a team. You're like, what are you doing? How are you losing to this team? And any Friday night, right? And so, and their opponents moving forward, they're it's one of those games where when you coach at a powerhouse, I've coached at powerhouse before too, that you're a lot of these teams Super Bowl. You are the Super Bowl that they've been waiting for, and they're like, we can make our name by taking out Jesse James. And so I'm sure that's gonna be a case with a lot of these schools, and you never know, right? These schools have pride, these coaches have pride, and you never know.
Don't forget Edison beat them for the first time in history, apparently, last year. And, they why not make it 2 in a row?
Yep.
Right? Go to try and make it 2 in a row.
Yep. But Ernie Banks, right? Let's play 2.
Let's play 2. And one side note with all this going on with Hayfield, young Overton does have some records he's chasing. He's chasing, I think, Virginia State all-time rushing record, Virginia State touchdown record. He's got some things, you know, I've seen some posts on social media and stuff that he's chasing some of these records. And to achieve those records, which I think, you know, he'd like to have, they got to win some games by a pretty hefty margin.
Yeah.
So, and they got to score some points to win, to break those records. So, should be interesting to see if he can, you know, get some of those records.
Yeah. I mean, he's obviously a special athlete. I mean, it's one of those ones where Tony Rojas was one a couple years ago, right? Where like you kind of wanted to watch that kid play. Unfortunately, we had to watch him up close and personal, which was not always the easiest thing going. And what's weird is you have a personal relationship with the kid. You've known Tony for a long time. When you watched him, you're like, that kid is different than everybody else in the field. It was pretty obvious when you watched him. And I think the same thing now with the young Overton. You know, you watch him and you're like, that kid is different. And I say throughout my life there have been times, again, being from Long Beach, I remember watching Deshaun Jackson when he was at Poly, being like, oh my God, that kid is unreal. I mean, you know, and he's the kind of athlete that just kind of changed his game. Similar to a Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson, his senior year, played wide receiver all year till they got to the I guess would be the region championship for Virginia, the CIF championship, and they put him in that corner because they knew that if you press covered their outside receiver, it was an automatic fade call, and they were like, okay, have fun with that. And he goes and he just makes a difference, right? And just kind of talk about Deshaun. And then we played him, and the DBs came back to the sideline after the first drive, and they said, "Don't call man coverage anymore, because if you call man coverage, it's going to be a touchdown." So keep us back because we know now. We didn't have bad athletes. We had kids who could play, but they kind of knew going forward.
Right.
You know, again, just time my experience. I remember playing against Willie McGinnis. I did play against Willie McGinnis was a senior when I was a freshman, but I remember he was just a man among boys. You know, he was obviously different, and I think the same thing you're going to see right now at Overton, right? I mean, he's obviously, you know, and I mean, the kids in Virginia, right? That you've seen. Who was the guy at Westfield?
Evan Royster.
Yeah, right. Obviously, just different kid. And Noah Kim. Noah Kim is that
Noah Kim at quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. When they walked in the field, you kind of knew, and
right.
And so, you know, luckily for us, we're not coaching this year, so we don't have to worry. We don't have to, you know, be pulling our hair outs and drinking the Maalox, watching the kid. We actually enjoy watching this kid play, which will be pretty exciting.
That's right.
And again, with me calling defense last year, and you know, for the first time in a while, I am going to be excited to watch the outside linebacker that they have this year playing. You know, obviously Navy commit, and also to get in the Navy, right, means the kid must be a solid student.
Solid.
Must be a solid student, right? I mean,
right.
Navy is not. You know,
good student, good human being. You know, good all around.
Navy is taking our best and our brightest. Going to Navy. So you know, it's going to be exciting for him to play on there, and you know, especially because obviously Hayfield's gonna get some leads, and that kid's going to get a chance to really get after quarterback.
Right.
Which will be pretty fun to watch. Pretty fun to watch.
Well, as we kind of wrap up the national conference, we knew it was going to be a longer episode. We knew we had to address the national situation going on with Hayfield.
Yeah.
So we kind of, you know, got that out of the way. Talk about football again. Before we close out, though, got to ask you. I'm going to ask you this for every conference. Give me a dark horse. You know, team that might surprise. You know, people in the playoffs, that kind of thing. Go ahead. Give me a dark horse, and then give me a favorite.
So, I'll go favorite first because obviously, I mean, there's no secret, right?
Right.
Regardless of what you heard about Trent, the fact is they have Jeffrey Overton, who is the best player in the state. You know, so I mean, when you have that type of kid, you're going to be the favorite on every game you go into. I mean, it is what it is. And Hayfield is the defending district championship, so you add him to the mix with those kids. You know, that's going to be him. Now I'm going to go with my dark horse. I'm going to go Falls Church. I like what I hear about Coach Coogan. You know, I think you get. I think when we got done playing them, you get the right guy there, you can do something, you know. And I think my dark horse right now is Falls Church.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, I mean, I echo what you said as far as the favorite. It's going to be Hayfield. And to your point, it might have been Hayfield regardless.
Right.
It might have.
Right.
But now, you know, if just bring in, forget about, you know, 85,000 recruits or whatever, like it's like the movie 300, right? Forget about that. You know, it just the one guy,
right?
Like you said, when you get a player that special, you know, it's hard to beat a team. So I'm going to go Hayfield as my favorite to win probably that conference. But the dark horse team, right, that might surprise people, and maybe doesn't surprise people because they ended the season off pretty darn good, Mount Vernon. I thought that Mount Vernon, that win versus Edison at the end of the year.
Yeah.
To me, I look at that and I'm like, that's an interesting one. So keep an eye on Mount Vernon and talking to.
So your dark horse is a playoff team?
So I think Mount Vernon is going to be a solid team. No, is it a dark horse? You're right. I mean, they were a playoff team last year. No, it's not a dark horse. But I think they win some games this year that maybe they didn't win a year ago, and therefore, kind of a higher seed.
Well, just kind of, and again, I'm not going with my dark horse, but the fact is, Mount Vernon plays a murderer's row early on. So when they get to Hayfield, it's not going to be culture shock, right? They're not playing, a weaker schedule. I'm not denigrating the rest of their teams, but they play some heavyweights.
Yes,
and so they're not going to be as shell. That's the one thing when you play a team that's really good like that. If you haven't seen that kind of talent before, and you go back to California, if when you get on the field with certain teams, if you haven't seen that kind of speed or that kind of size before, it can really be difficult for your kids because you can't mimic that. You can't mimic what they have in practice. When you're playing a really talented team,
right?
Whether it's let's go to California. If it's modern day or a Bosco or a Long Beach Poly or something like that, you can't mimic what they have because you don't have what they have. Now Mount Vernon, on the other hand, is playing some really good football teams that might be able to sell that their kids are a little more adjusted. And again, it won't take them a quarter and a half to try to save themselves.
Yeah, no, agreed. So I do like Mount Vernon, my dark horse, and whether or not it's a dark horse, who knows? That's my dark horse. So that's the National Conference. Now we head on next week and move on down the road. We're going to go down to our backyard. We're going to head on over to the Patriot Conference.
The Patriot. We've seen those teams for a little while. Seen all those teams. Yeah, we've seen them for a little while.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the Patriot. Since we called the Concord the SEC, we were calling the Patriot the Big Ten.
That's what I was going to say. That's the Big Ten. If one's the SEC, this is the Big Ten.
Yeah, very 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 power run driven football conference, right? Lot of power up there in the good old Patriot.
Right,
and the large conference at the large conference.
Really good coaching.
Really good coaching.
A lot of
experience coaching. I mean, you think about right. You have Coach Doc over at Braddock, right? Obviously, very long tenured. Jerry Pannoni, long tenured, right? Trey Taylor, long tenured. Eric Henderson, long tenured, right? Yeah. I mean, just those four. I mean, if you add those fours win totals up, I mean,
it's a lot of wins.
Talking about a lot of wins, a lot of football. A lot of those guys are quality. They're all quality coaches. I think that the Patriot, has a lot of quality coaches, which is why we're no longer coaching there. Apparently, we've been removed and told to get back on and cover football.
We don't know enough. That's why we're here. We're spies like us. That's why we're here. We're here. Okay, we're the decoys. So we're here doing this. We're not coaching anymore. It's better for everybody. Fun talk tonight. It was very fun talking about national. And I'm glad we kind of got, through that and got able to talk about, all the Hayfield stuff and talk about football, and be done with the nonsense. Yeah. And I look forward to the Patriot talk next week. And I don't know, anything else you want to on the way out? Anything else you got to say?
No, that's all. I do spend most of my days now playing NCAA 25. I can't seem to get done playing enough. That was when I was in college. That was my favorite game. That's one we played all the time. We played more than Madden, and so USC is currently 8-0.
Nice
on the road to a national championship.
Nice.
So fight on.
I'm gonna go play my Sega Genesis. That's what I do. I'm an old school kind of guy.
Playing little Joe Montana. Great play.
At Deion Sanders football. It became Deion later on after Joe Montana.
Did it really?
It did become Deion Sanders.
Yeah.
Well, Coach Mesa, good talk tonight. And enjoy the barbershop. And I can't wait for tomorrow. See you guys next time from all Hitches, everyone's favorite play. Right? It really is. And it's everyone's favorite podcast. So we'll see you guys next time.